Can you imagine that the most dominant driver in Formula One is silently preparing his exit, while testing a Mercedes on the most dangerous circuit in the world? Because what Max Verstappen is doing at the Nürburgring is not normal, it is not a coincidence, and it is not a simple whim either. We are talking about a movement that has set off all the alarms within the paddock, with a brutal car, completely optimized for endurance, and with a context where Red Bull no longer seems as solid as before. Why does Verstappen decide to get into a Mercedes-AMG GT3 right now? What is behind this decision? And above all, are we seeing the first step of a change that can completely shake up Formula One in the coming years? What is happening with Max Verstappen at the Nürburgring cannot be understood without looking at the entire context surrounding this movement, because here we are not simply talking about a driver testing a different car, we are seeing one of the most dominant competitors of the modern era entering a completely different terrain at the most delicate moment in his sporting career. And while in Formula One the panorama is beginning to show cracks, with a Red Bull that no longer transmits the same technical superiority and with constant rumors about internal tensions and doubts about future performance, Verstappen decides to take a step that completely breaks the expected script. Compete in the 24 hours of Nürburgring with a Mercedes-AMG GT3 EVO 2026, a car designed not to shine in one lap, but to survive for 24 hours at the limit on the most demanding circuit on the planet. This is where everything starts to make sense, because the Nürburgring is not just any circuit, it is the place where the good drivers are separated from the truly complete ones. The so-called green hell demands something that modern Formula One no longer tests in the same way: extreme mental endurance, constant adaptation to changing conditions, unpredictable traffic and car management that goes far beyond pure speed. And precisely for this reason, the choice of the Mercedes-AMG GT3 EVO 2026 is no coincidence, because this car has been developed with a very clear philosophy: stability, predictability and long-term consistency, even sacrificing maximum performance in favor of a platform that allows it to maintain pace for hours without destroying tires or making critical mistakes. The modifications that this GT3 EVO 2026 incorporates further reinforce this idea, with adjustments to the stabilizer bars, a suspension optimized to absorb the aggressive curves of the Nordschleife, a much more balanced weight distribution and aerodynamics designed to offer stable load in medium corners without compromising agility. This is not a car designed to impress in qualifying, it is a machine designed to win long races, where every little detail makes the difference between finishing or abandoning. And this is where Verstappen finds the perfect environment to show a different version of himself, a more calculating, more strategic, more complete version. But what is really important is not just the car, but everything behind this project. Verstappen is not competing with just any structure, he is doing so with his own team, Verstappen Racing, in collaboration with Windward Racing and with the direct support of both Red Bull and Mercedes-AMG Motorsport. This combination is, in itself, an enormous sign, because it unites two worlds that are direct rivals in Formula One, and it does so at a time where Verstappen's own future is surrounded by uncertainty. It is not simply a participation, it is a movement calculated, measured and perfectly aligned with a possible transition in your career. Furthermore, timing is key, because all this happens in 2026, just when Mercedes is positioning itself as the technical reference with its dominant car and when Red Bull faces doubts with its new engine project. It's impossible not to connect the dots. Verstappen is not just testing a car, he is exploring scenarios, he is building relationships, he is expanding his range as a driver, and, above all, he is sending a very clear message to the paddock. He is not dependent on Formula One to prove that he is the best. In reality, it raises a much deeper question than it seems. Are we seeing Verstappen diversifying as a driver? Or are we witnessing the first step of a strategic exit towards a future where Mercedes could be his destination? Because when you analyze each piece of this movement, from the car, the team, the circuit, and the chosen moment, everything indicates that this is not a passing madness. It is a perfectly constructed plan that is just beginning. At this point, everything escalates to another, much deeper level, because now it is no longer just about the context or intentions, but about the real impact that Verstappen can have within an environment completely different from the one he dominates. And this is where the most important factor of all comes in: adaptation. Because the Nürburgring does not forgive, and the Mercedes-AMG GT3 EVO 2026, although it is designed to be stable and predictable, requires a radically different type of driving than that of a Formula One single-seater. Here there is no constant clean air, there are no millimetric strategies of 2 or 3 stops. Here there is continuous traffic, changing conditions, accumulated wear and tear, and mental management that lasts for hours, where each error is paid dearly. And it is precisely at this point where Verstappen can make a difference that goes beyond pure talent. Because if there is one thing he has demonstrated throughout his career, it is his ability to adapt to any circumstance, but this is a completely different dimension. In GT3, the driver not only has to be fast, he has to be intelligent over long periods, knowing when to attack, when to conserve, how to interact with slower drivers, how to read the traffic in tight areas of the Nordschleife, and, above all, how to maintain concentration during stints that can seem eternal. It is a physical challenge, yes, but above all a mental one. In addition, there is a key element that increases the complexity even more. The car is designed to be friendly even for non-professional drivers, which implies that its limit is not as aggressive as that of a Formula One, but much more treacherous when exceeded. This means that Verstappen will have to adjust his natural instinct to always push the limit, understanding that in a 24-hour race it is not the fastest who wins, but the most consistent. And this is where the real learning comes in, because this type of discipline forces any driver to redefine his approach, to think in terms of hours and not laps, to build a race step by step instead of squeezing every corner to the maximum. But the most interesting thing is how all this fits into his evolution as a driver. Because Verstappen does not need to prove that he is fast, that is already more than clear. What he is doing here is something much more strategic. He is expanding his profile, he is becoming a total pilot. By facing this type of competition, you are acquiring tools that could even be transferred to Formula One, especially in terms of management, race reading, and control in adverse conditions. And at the same time, he is showing that he can dominate any category in which he competes. And this is where the impact becomes even bigger, because within the paddock this does not go unnoticed. Teams, engineers, and managers are watching every move. They are not just watching Verstappen race at the Nürburgring, they are evaluating how he behaves outside his comfort zone, how he works with other teams, how he adapts to a completely different car. And at a time where his future in Formula One is not completely assured, this becomes a brutal letter of introduction for any structure that wants to have him in the future. And this is where everything ends up coming together. Because what seemed like a simple participation in the Nürburgring, which many classified as madness, or just another whim of Max Verstappen, begins to reveal its true dimension. We are no longer talking about adaptation or even performance. We are talking about consequences. Because when you put all the pieces together, the chosen moment, the car, the team, the context in Formula One, and the way in which Verstappen is facing this challenge, what appears before us is something much bigger. A possible break with the present and the beginning of a new era in his career. Because let's think about this coldly, Verstappen doesn't need to do this. He does not need to prove anything outside of Formula One. He does not need to expose himself on a circuit like the Nürburgring where the risk is extreme. He does not need to share a car or adapt to completely different dynamics. And yet he is doing it. Because there is something else at stake. Because these types of movements are not made without an objective behind them, and everything indicates that this objective is directly connected to their future. This is where the Mercedes factor comes in with brutal force. Not only because the car he is driving belongs to his sporting structure, but because it coincides with a moment where the German team is positioned as the technical reference for the new regulations, while Red Bull enters a phase of uncertainty with its new project. The coincidence cannot be ignored. Verstappen is not just testing a GT3, he is getting closer, he is building links, he is understanding from the inside how a structure works that could be key in his next step. And meanwhile, the message towards Red Bull is silent but forceful. There are no explosive statements, there are no public conflicts. But there are facts. And in Formula One, facts weigh more than any words. When your star driver begins to explore abroad, to get involved in other projects, to expand his radius of action just in a moment of internal doubts, what he is saying is clear. He wants to win, and if he can't do it here, he will do it somewhere else. But most shocking of all is what this means in the long term. Because if Verstappen manages to be competitive or even dominant in an environment like the Nürburgring, if he shows that he can transfer his talent to a completely different discipline and continue to make a difference, then his figure definitively transcends Formula One. He stops being just a world champion to become a total driver, capable of redefining his legacy in multiple categories, something that very few in history have achieved. And that is where this story stops being a simple narrative and becomes a turning point. Because what we are seeing could be remembered in the future as the beginning of a transition, as the moment in which Verstappen began to write the next chapter of his career. One where Formula One is no longer the only scenario. So the real question is no longer what Verstappen is doing at the Nürburgring. The real question is, how far is he willing to go? Because if this is just the beginning, then what comes next could completely change the map of motorsport as we know it. And after analyzing absolutely everything, it is clear that this is not just a flashy story of the moment. It is a sign. A sign that Max Verstappen is entering a new phase of his career, one in which he no longer limits himself to dominating Formula One, but begins to build something much bigger, much more complete and much more dangerous for the entire world of motorsport. Because what we have seen at the Nürburgring with that 2026 Mercedes-AMG GT3 EVO is not just an experiment, it is a real test of how far you can go when you leave your comfort zone. It is confirmation that your talent does not depend on a specific car, a regulation, or a specific context. It is adaptable, it is versatile, and, above all, it continues to evolve when it already seemed to have won everything. Furthermore, this movement leaves an even more important reading. Verstappen is not waiting for things to happen. He is taking control of his future. While other drivers depend on their team's decisions, he is exploring, building relationships, understanding new structures, and preparing for any scenario that may come. And that, in a sport as political and changing as Formula One, is a huge advantage. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.